podcast. My name is Bill Pivots. So before I get started, I want to wish you all Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and a Happy New Year. I took the last couple weeks off because family things going on the holidays with work, all that fun stuff. But now I'm back, and I'm going to be recapping the last 2 weeks of NXT. The first one took place on December 28th. That was the show in Osaka, Japan. They did promote the Samoa Joe Nakamura match again, which we saw a shortened version of it a couple weeks ago. But the show kicked off with Oney Lorcan versus Andrade Cien Almas. Almas came out wearing his mask, similar to what he wore as his La Sombra days back in Japan. They actually alluded to that during his entrance, but he did take it off as the match started. Almas was very heelish in this one, despite being a favorite of the crowd. He was disrespecting Lorcan a couple times. It was just weird. The Japan crowd always weirds me out because they are deathly silent during their matches. They just clap for some of the nice spots, but they don't go over and above and beyond like the Full Sail or any of the American crowds do. They're just very respectful during the matches. So it kind of freaked me out that the crowd was just quiet throughout the whole match. Lorcan got a near fall after a nice blockbuster. They did go back and forth a little bit before Lorcan hit a inverted exploder suplex. He then hit 2 hip attacks, but almost dodged the third one and hit his running knees in the corner. Lorcan kicked out, and then he actually won with a super reverse exploder to get the win. Big surprise for me. I didn't think Lorcan was going to win. He hasn't been shown as much of a winner during his time on NXT, and they've been building Almas up as somewhat of a legitimate heel. But giving Lorcan the win in Japan was a big surprise. It was a good match. Wasn't too bad, but it was what it was. It really doesn't impact the whole story around NXT. It was just a house show that they televised, but Lorcan getting the win was pretty cool. Second match was Liv Morgan and Aaliyah versus Peyton Royce and Billie Kay. I said before the match began, I really can't see myself enjoying this one, and I was pretty much on point there. And before I get into the match, I just love Corey Graves' hatred of New Jersey. Even though I live here, it's just pretty funny how much he rags on it, and some of the stuff he says is true. Liv spun Kay around multiple times in like a sunset pin setup, and the ref counted each time, which was pretty funny. Like every time they would roll around, he would do a 1 count. The heels took control over Aaliyah for a long time. It was very boring. Aaliyah escaped a double suplex. She made the tag to Liv Morgan, but it didn't last long as Royce landed a bulldog across Billie Kay's knee to get the win. Yeah, wasn't the most enjoyable match. The heels spent way too much time working over Aaliyah, and like I said, it just bored me. The former jobbers are the top heels in the women's division, but the crowd isn't really giving them much. They're more or less giving them go-away heat than heel heat, which doesn't do them any favors. Morgan and Aaliyah are decent undercard options, but this women's division is just, it's not what it used to be. I've said it before, obviously, you've heard it before, but there's just no stars besides Asuka. Third match was DIY defending their tag team titles against Akira Tozawa and Tajiri. Match of the night, before I even get into it, it was a lot of back and forth between the two teams early. The challengers worked over Ciampa before they went to a commercial break. There was a slap fight before Ciampa caught, I think it was Tozawa with a backbreaker. I just miss his yelling from the Cruiserweight Classic. He would just scream everything. Tajiri landed some huge kicks and his backspring elbow. Things then broke down a little bit as Tozawa took out DIY with 2 dives to the outside. Tajiri locked Gargano in the Tarantula. Ciampa got a blind tag and hit Tozawa with 2 German suplexes. Tozawa came back with a snap German suplex to Gargano and a delayed German suplex on Ciampa. Ciampa lifted Tozawa up for a powerbomb and then turned it into a backbreaker. And then they hit their double super kick finisher on Tozawa to get the win. Great match. Obviously, DIY aren't losing their titles considering the stipulation they have coming up in a couple weeks. But it really didn't affect my interest in the match. I love seeing Tozawa. Seeing Tajiri back in a WWE ring is always nice. He was actually just on 205 Live with Brian Kendrick. So they're incorporating him back in, which is nice to see. It was just a really fun match with the Japanese crowd reacting to the high spots. And there were a lot of cool spots too, like Tajiri doing his thing, Tozawa and Ciampa going back and forth. But it's just making me look forward that much more to the DIY revival match next week. After the match, DIY bowed to Tajiri and Tozawa as they left. Next match was Asuka defending her women's championship against Nia Jax. This match just proved that Nia Jax still belongs in NXT, but this match doesn't belong in the main event. It was boring beyond belief. Nia landed a couple headbutts early and tossed Asuka around the ring. They built this like a David versus Goliath match, but the fact that they built Asuka up in such a way that she had to back down to Nia Jax just was illogical in my belief. There was a botched Samoan drop in this at some point in the match. I don't know if Asuka was trying to escape or if Nia Jax lost her grip, but they kind of just fell backwards. Asuka tried fighting back, but Nia Jax dominated her. A little later, Asuka attempted a few more submission attempts and then some kicks. She then landed a nice German suplex, and then Nia Jax screamed. Asuka landed one more kick to the head and got the win. Yeah, I didn't really care for their previous meeting. I think it was at one of the TakeOver specials, and this was really nothing different. Nia Jax playing the monster role is nice, but when you're building your champion as a dominant healer babyface, I really don't know what Asuka is. Having Nia Jax come in and just dominate her like that, it was kind of underwhelming. Yeah, there's this whole weird countout thing going on that Nia just kept Asuka on the outside, and the commentators were making a point that that Nia Jax can't win the title by countout. And Nia just stayed in the ring, and then Asuka crawled back in the ring, but she didn't need to because you can retain your title on a countout. So it was just weird logic by both women that kind of just took me out of the match. It wasn't the greatest. And I do take back what I said. This actually wasn't the main event. They showed the Samoa Joe Nakamura match in full. I recapped it a couple weeks ago, so I'm not going to go into it. I didn't like the shortened version. I don't think an extra 10 minutes or so that they showed here was going to change my interest in that. But Nakamura won back his title in his home country. This week, it was decent. Probably B minus at best. The Lorcan Almas match was actually pretty good with the surprise finish. And I liked the tag team title match. Everything else was a ho-hum at best. The next week's episode, which actually aired on Wednesday, aired from Melbourne, Australia. We have the tag match of Elias Sampson and Bobby Roode against Buddy Murphy and Tye Dillinger. Liv Morgan versus Billie Kay versus Ember Moon. And DIY versus TM61 for the tag titles. That is actually going to be a stacked show, and I'll get back to that in just a bit. Okay, I'm back, and this week's episode aired from Melbourne, Australia. We have Joe Nakamura for the NXT title and a steel cage, which is being dubbed as the final encounter. The show kicked off with the Revival versus Riddick Moss and Tino Sabbatelli. Revival got a huge pop when their music hit, but I still see this as a heel versus heel tag match. The way Riddick Moss and Tino Sabbatelli carry themselves is very heelish. They're very cocky. And obviously we've seen what the Revival have done in the past, that they're in no way a babyface. The fans did chant, "Who are ya?" at Tino and Moss. Tino caught Dash off the ropes with a nice twisting crossbody. Riddick hit Dawson with he caught him in midair with a fallaway slam. So they're improving greatly from what we've seen last year in the Tag Team Classic. The fans, though, were behind Dash and Dawson throughout the whole match. Tino got the cold tag and took out both opponents. He lifted Dash up and threw him into Dawson. There was a couple back and forth near falls, but the Revival caught, I think it was Tino Sabbatelli with the Shatter Machine to get the win. Decent match. Obviously, Tino and Riddick are still green, and it showed in some parts of the match, but they've improved considering what we've seen over the last year. It was just awkward with the heel versus heel. Crowd was into him, but as a realistic fan, who do you cheer for in that situation? Do you cheer for the underdogs? Or do you just cheer for the team that you know in the Revival? So it was just awkward. I enjoyed the match. I enjoy watching the Revival, but I don't know. It was just a weird dynamic to open the show. Second match was second of 3 tag team matches. Bobby Roode and Elias Sampson versus Buddy Murphy and Tye Dillinger. Elias went to do his song and play guitar, but the crowd pretty much just shit all over him. Luckily, he kept it short as Bobby Roode made his entrance. It was a very interesting mix of people here. Obviously, we have the Roode-Dillinger feud, but Sampson and Murphy were kind of just thrown in there. Murphy, the hometown guy, so he makes sense, but Sampson's whatever. Tye and Roode had a bit of a stare down. Roode tagged in Elias to get away, and the crowd began chanting "Drift Away." Faces worked over Elias, but Tye couldn't control his rage and went after Roode, which allowed Elias Sampson to take control. Roode was landing punches on Tye, and you know how when they do it for Tye, they do 10, 10, 10. But for Roode, they were actually just chanting 1, which was pretty comical. Tye connected with a super kick out of the corner. Murphy took out Roode on the outside, and Dillinger hit Sampson with the tiebreaker to get the win. I liked it better than the first match. Might have went on a little too long with Elias Sampson in there, but the crowd was a little better. Obviously, Tye Dillinger is great. His character is great. The fans love him. Bobby Roode is, dare I say, glorious. Murphy's pretty good, and Sampson didn't really do much on offense that I can care less about him. They'll both go back to mediocrity after this, and especially once we're back at Full Sail. Roode's going on to Nakamura, as we saw from the Fatal 4-Way, so Tye Dillinger is kind of left in limbo. And again, another reason why I think there should be a mid-card title in NXT. Give guys like Dillinger and Sampson and those guys something to work for, because the main event can only feature 2 people at a time. Third match, women's triple threat, Ember Moon, Liv Morgan, Billie Kay. Billie Kay got a huge ovation from her home country crowd, but she was obviously not pandering to it, telling them to shut up throughout the match. It's been a while since we've seen Ember Moon, so I'm happy to see her in the ring. Liv was in control early. She took out both women with the diving bulldog. She was then sent to the outside by both Billie Kay and Ember Moon. Kay got a near fall after a spinning elbow. Kay then sent Ember Moon to the outside and tossed Liv Morgan on top of her. Ember began her comeback. We then got a nice Tower of Doom spot, but Ember held on, and as Kay powerbombed Liv Morgan, Ember set up, hit the Eclipse, and got the win. A little sloppy in the beginning, especially between Liv and Billie Kay. But Kay spent most of the match in control. Liv Morgan was kind of third-wheeling it here, just being a little underdog. But that finish, obviously Ember Moon is going to go over. She's the next babyface on the women's roster, and it might have been the best finisher that she hit. Billie Kay, probably the perfect height, I guess. She was bending over. It didn't look too obvious that she was just standing there waiting for the finish. And the way that it happened, Ember Moon held on. She was in the perfect spot to hit her finisher and got the win. Fourth match, DIY against TM61. We had a bit of a back and forth between Ciampa and Shane Thorne and Gargano and Nick Miller. DIY hit Miller with a corner kick knee combo. Miller actually came back, took out DIY with a double diving clothesline to the outside. He got the hot tag and hit Gargano with a nice exploder, and Ciampa with a forearm for a near fall. There was this weird spot in the middle of the match. They were going for another Tower of Doom spot, but Thorne actually suplexed Ciampa as Miller powerbombed his own partner. He then went for the pin, but Gargano broke it up by shoving Nick Miller into them. It was just awkward because the ref had to delay his count. I don't know if they were too far away, but he did the 1, 2, and then slowed down the 3 in order for them to break up the pin spot. The crowd knew it. They were chanting that was a 3 count for at least 30 seconds or so. Ciampa hit Thorne with the backbreaker powerbomb for another near fall, and then Miller almost won, but DIY hit their finisher to get the win. Best match of the 3 tag matches so far and best match of the night. The delayed pin count was a little awkward, but it didn't really take away too much from the match. The babyface dynamic here was much better than the heel at the beginning of the show. Much better match. The crowd was cheering for pretty much everything that happened in this match. TM61 I'm warming up to a little bit. Really don't know what their gimmick is, but I can't take away from what they do in the ring. After the match, TM61 got a standing ovation from their hometown fans. DIY went back in the ring. They shook hands, hugged, and they all raised arms as they went to a commercial break. Fifth and final match was Nakamura and Samoa Joe for the NXT title in a steel cage. We got another recap from what they showed in Japan, and they actually aired parts of this match about a month ago, but we got a full version of this match this week. Really not good to go into it. Nakamura retains. He hit a Kinshasa off the top rope. He went to leave, but he turned around and hit a third Kinshasa to get the win. And I actually forgot going into the show that there was another 2-hour show. But I'm happy I stayed around and watched. I could have tuned out at the main event because we already saw what happened. But yeah, the Dillinger Roode match was really good. The tag team title match was really good as well. Women's triple threat was decent. Wasn't bad. Opening match was alright. And I'm just happy that we're done with Nakamura and Samoa Joe. They're going to start building towards TakeOver. You got Nakamura, Bobby Roode. I don't know what that means for Samoa Joe. Is he just going to have a one-off match at TakeOver and then we'll see him on the main roster, or is he not going to be on TakeOver at all? That'll be interesting to watch, but we got a couple more weeks left till TakeOver. It's, I think, January 28th, Saturday, so it's about 3 weeks. Next week, we do have the rematch between DIY and the Revival. The winner will face the Authors of Pain at TakeOver. Asuka's going to be on next week's show as well, so the ball's rolling. We'll get things started here. All right, guys, thanks for checking out Pib's NXT Point of View podcast. I'll be back next week with episode 95. Peace.